Hello there, this is a Nissan Primera P11 and somebody once covered it in manure, on purpose. This car belonged to a close family member, so I can tell you how he got it, how it got covered in manure, why it got scrapped a few years later and more. Now, the owner of the car doesn't want to appear in this video, but that's roughly what he looks like. Can you see the family resemblance? I think so. Welcome to CarSpyTV. Right, let's get started. In 2004, my family member was 20 years old, he just passed his driving test and he wanted to buy his first car. He therefore turned to me for help. However, rather than suggest a small, low-powered, cheap-to-run Super Mini, you know, the kind of car that suits a new driver, I found him a big, thirsty 2-litre family car. Oh dear. That'll teach him to ask for help. Here's the advert the garage put online at the time. It confirms the car was a 1997 R-Reg Nissan Primera 2-litre GX petrol with manual transmission. As you can see, it had just over 74,000 miles on the clock, the price was £2,575 and it had full service history. Well, some of that wasn't quite true. Whereas the advert said the car had full service history, there were only a few stamps in the service booklet. That was nowhere near enough. However, the car felt better maintained than the paperwork suggested, so we did some digging. As it was a local car, we therefore phoned local Nissan dealers who were independent of the garage trying to sell the car and asked if they knew it, if they'd serviced it, and a few other probing questions. Bottom line, we found out that the car had been serviced on more occasions than the service book suggested. We found other corroborating evidence too. So, whereas the service history wasn't full, it was acceptable considering the car's age and price. So, we tested the car at length and it was a good example. In fact, the only issue of note was that a stone had damaged one of the headlamps. There was a hole straight through it. So, once the dealer agreed to replace the headlamp, and once we negotiated a substantial discount, we decided to buy the car. Happy days. The owner then regularly used the car to visit a garden that was open to the public. One day, the car was parked at this garden and someone approached it in a dump truck full of manure. He then deliberately, and I might add maliciously, poured the manure over the car and buried its front half. The bonnet was covered, it came halfway up the doors and there was a rather nasty smell. To this day, we don't know why he did this. Whatever the reason, the owner wasn't pleased. Anyway, the owner politely suggested to the dump truck driver that he should stay far, far away from this Nissan Primera P11 and, remarkably, resisted the temptation to rearrange his teeth. He then got back in his car, ploughed through the manure that was blocking his path and drove off with his dignity intact. The next year, 2005, was busy for this Nissan Primera P11. Why? Because the owner moved house every 2 or 3 weeks, literally, as he was working all over the country. As you can see, the boot was typically heavily laden with essential supplies such as Pringles, fizzy drinks, and this mysterious bag that's the same size as that bloke who drove the dump truck. Interesting. In 2006, the car was taken off the road for most of the year. Why? Because the owner settled in one place and didn't need to travel. So, the Nissan Primera stayed with me and I tucked it into bed every night. 2007 was more disastrous. One day, the car was back on the road and parked at a garden centre. This car park was virtually empty, but nonetheless, someone smashed into the near side of the Nissan Primera P11. Look at this big dent in the front door. And there's another one here on the wing. In fact, the damage was far worse than the pictures suggest and there were more dents further back. And guess what? Whoever hit the car drove away. He or she didn't leave a note and there were no witnesses. Now, the cost to repair the car properly was enormous and that money simply wasn't available. Furthermore, the owner didn't want to make an insurance claim and lose what little he had of a no-claims bonus. Luckily, a local garage pushed out the worst of the dents for only £60. The car still looked a mess, again far worse than the pictures suggest, but it was significantly better. Mercifully, 2008 was far less damaging and comparatively quiet. Nonetheless, here's a picture of the car parked next to a later generation Nissan Primera, specifically a P11 144. That car was also in the family. Oh, and here's a picture of the car covered in snow, which is far preferable to Manure. In 2009, the Nissan Primera became problematic. For example, it kept losing power and nobody could figure out why. It also needed a new exhaust, the garage wanted £750 just for that, and the clutch was worn out, etc, etc, etc. And of course, it still had all that bodywork damage from the collision a couple of years earlier. At this point, the cost to make the car right was many times its value and half the cost of a far newer, far safer replacement. So, the owner reluctantly decided to scrap the car. This is the Primera about to be towed away for scrap. Curiously, on that sad morning, and only ever on that morning, it refused to start. Perhaps it knew what was about to happen. So, the scrap man pushed the car onto the road, connected it to his tow truck, and drove away, wondering why there was a faint smell of manure. Okay, we have a few final points to consider. The owner kept the car for 5 years and it was a good, solid, reliable workhorse until those last few months. It didn't break down, it didn't fail MOTs, it was good to drive and it was spacious and practical. In other words, it was everything you expect from a Nissan Primera. Good car. Oh, now, before you go, don't forget to check out the Nissan Primera Owners Club, which is a fantastic resource. It covers every generation Primera and has helped to fix all kinds of issues. Find it at www.npoc.co.uk. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content, ask any questions in the comment section, and do me a favour and click like on this video. Right, that's all for now. Does anyone smell manure?